The room hums with the weight of applause that doesn't know where to land. Oprah's voice slices through the tension, controlled, polished, a velvet reprimand. Young leaders must learn patience before power. The crowd murmurs, half in awe, half in discomfort. Jasmine Crockett doesn't flinch. Her hand tightens around the mic, her gaze steady, unwavering. You think experience is power? Her tone is low, deliberate. Watch what truth sounds like. A single second of silence detonates in a chaos. Gasps, flashes, whispers ricocheting across the hall. Someone in the front row mouths, "Did she just say that?" Oprah blinks, caught between disbelief and irritation, her practiced composure faltering for the first time. On the live stream, hearts and fire emojis flood the feed. Comment sections explode. She's fearless. She's finished. She's iconic. The digital storm mirrors the one in the room. Crockett doesn't smile. She just lowers the mic, the quiet around her somehow louder than the applause building again, this time for her. Freeze frame. In less than 60 seconds, the entire lecture turned upside down. What began as a mentorship talk now trembles on the edge of transformation. But to understand how it reached this moment, we need to go back to where the tension first began. The Voices of Vision tour was supposed to be a celebration, not a showdown. Oprah's brand had spent months crafting the image. Mahogany stages, soft lighting, and a slogan that read, "Guiding the next generation of women to lead with grace." Each city brought standing ovations and sound bites of wisdom that trended for all the right reasons. Until Dallas. Until Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't supposed to be the story. She was the fresh face on the flyer, the rising firebrand from Texas. The local flavor meant to add texture to Oprah's narrative. But even before the cameras rolled, something felt off backstage. The air was thick with polite condescension, assistants whispering, producers exchanging glances. One stage manager muttered, "Remind her to keep it short and respectful." Another added, "She's passionate, just stay on script." Crockett heard every word. She adjusted her mic, smiled faintly, and said nothing. On stage, the contrast was electric. Oprah embodied legacy, her poise rehearsed, her voice symphonic with decades of dominance. Crockett, by comparison, was raw light. No filter, no polish, just presence. It wasn't hostility, it was physics. Two different gravities pulling at the same audience. When the applause began, it carried two different meanings. Some clapped for nostalgia, others for the new. Oprah spoke of composure, of restraint as a virtue. Crockett countered softly, "Sometimes restraint just means silence in the face of wrong." The crowd shifted, sensing an edge beneath the elegance. Generations collided in tone and tempo. One woman protecting the sanctity of control, the other redefining power as honesty. And somewhere between respect and rebellion, the spark caught. What had begun as a mentorship talk began to tilt toward confrontation, each word orbiting closer to ignition. Neither woman expected their words to collide this hard, or this publicly. But the roots of this moment stretched far deeper than a lecture stage or a live broadcast. They ran through years of image-making, expectation, and quiet rebellion. Before the world saw a viral clash, life had already been shaping both of them for it. And to understand why Jasmine Crockett stood so unshaken that night, we have to start long before Dallas, back in the stories that built these two forces of nature. For decades, Oprah Winfrey was the nation's moral compass in heels, the woman who could make presidents cry and strangers feel seen. Her rise was mythic, a black woman commanding daytime television, transforming interviews into confessions and empathy into empire. She taught America how to listen, how to heal, how to believe. Her show wasn't just a program. It was therapy, culture, ritual. People didn't just watch Oprah, they worshipped her. But legacy, when stretched too long, starts to echo. When her talk show ended, the spotlight didn't dim, it calcified. The empire became a brand, the brand became armor. OWN, Super Soul, Vision Tours. each venture carefully curated to project grace and universality. The message never changed: empowerment, but on her terms. Controlled, edited, safe. The spontaneous fire that once defined her became a managed flame. In recent years, cracks began to show. Her interviews shifted from revelation to restraint. Audiences noticed how uncomfortable she grew when guests challenged her worldview. Moments of dissent, once welcomed, now met polite shutdowns. The once boundless listener seemed allergic to unpredictability. She'd mastered every conversation and forgotten how to lose one. Whispers turned to criticism. Some accused her of performative empathy, of selling inspiration without accountability. Her neutrality on political and racial flashpoints drew side eyes from those who once saw her as fearless. She wasn't canceled. She was calcified, fossilized in perfection. Her dignity, once liberating, now felt suffocating still. Oprah remained untouchable. Billionaire, icon, philanthropist, eternal teacher. Yet behind the glow, fatigue lingered. The more she spoke about authenticity, the less authentic she seemed. To maintain her myth, she edited reality and herself. Every gesture rehearsed, every smile branded. And then came the invitations, panels, summits, lectures, all designed to preserve her as America's high priestess of grace. Voices of Vision was another ceremony in that long tradition. Oprah as oracle, surrounded by acolytes. But on that stage, she met someone who refused to play the role of disciple. Jasmine Crockett didn't grow up watching Oprah as gospel. She admired her, yes, but not as an idol, as a symbol of what could be surpassed. Crockett represented everything Oprah once was and could no longer risk being. Spontaneous, unfiltered, unafraid to disrupt the polite order of things. That night, Oprah wasn't battling another guest. She was battling time, the erosion of her myth by the reality she helped create. When she looked at Crockett, she didn't just see a rising politician. She saw the mirror of her younger self, one that didn't obey the choreography of legacy. The irony was painful. For decades, Oprah had given voice to the voiceless. Now she was silencing one, not out of cruelty, but out of habit, the instinct to control the story before the story controls her. In her eyes, Crockett's defiance wasn't disrespect. It was danger, a threat to the fragile ecosystem of grace she'd built. Yet in that very fear lay the truth. Dignity isn't a brand. It's a risk. The audience that once followed Oprah unquestioningly was evolving, craving voices that didn't need polish to be powerful. That shift wasn't rebellion. It was renewal. For decades, Oprah shaped America's idea of dignity. But today, that same dignity faced its most unfiltered challenger yet. And while Oprah's story was written in headlines, Jasmine's was forged in fire. Before the stage lights, before the viral clips, Jasmine Crockett's world was fluorescent and tired. She came up in Dallas courtrooms where the paint peeled and the air hummed with exhaustion. Public defense wasn't glamour. It was grit. She fought for people who didn't have anyone else to fight for them, walking into rooms where her presence alone was an argument. Judges called her young lady. Opposing counsel smirked when she rose to speak. They didn't see her as a threat. They saw her as a test. And she passed every single one. Her cases weren't about fame. They were about fairness. Eviction hearings, wrongful arrests, families torn apart by paperwork and power. She learned early that justice isn't found in headlines. It's wrestled for in silence. She spoke fast, thought faster, and never once apologized for either. The media didn't know what to make of her. Too sharp to ignore, too honest to brand. When she entered politics, they called her fiery, defiant, unpolished. Code words for a woman who refused to perform humility for comfort. But her constituents didn't want polish. They wanted proof that someone still believed truth could stand up straight without asking permission. Every microphone handed to her was a dare, not an invitation. Would she soften her voice? Would she play nice? She didn't. She spoke the way she always had, from the gut, from the street corners that raised her, from the benches outside courthouses where families waited to hear verdicts they could barely afford to challenge. Her rise was slow, uneven, and unstoppable. Each attack made her sharper. Each dismissal became another paragraph in a story she never asked to write. She carried the weight of expectations, of being black, being female, being too much in rooms built to contain her, and she turned it into fuel. Her speeches weren't crafted for applause. They were built to pierce complacency. When she was invited to Oprah's Voices of Vision lecture, most people assumed she'd be grateful, a young politician honored to share the stage with royalty. But Crockett didn't see royalty. She saw responsibility. She'd spent her entire life speaking truth to systems that looked untouchable. Oprah's stage was just another room that needed light. So when she walked onto that stage, she wasn't seeking approval. She wasn't chasing validation or legacy. She was bringing her own light, the kind that doesn't flicker when challenged. The world saw a politician meeting a celebrity. But beneath the applause, it was something deeper, the unfiltered meeting of truth and image, fire and glass. Crockett carried the stories of every client, every protest, every long night of doubt and determination. She knew what silence cost. She knew what performance disguised, and she refused to trade her authenticity for anyone's comfort. That light met resistance, and what followed was the spark heard around the internet. The lights softened as Oprah leaned forward, her voice carrying that familiar calm authority that could hush a room. Leadership, she began, every syllable polished, begins with knowing when to listen. The crowd nodded, some already clapping. It was the kind of line that sounded like truth, even when it wasn't tested. Jasmine Crockett waited. She didn't fidget, didn't smile. When the applause faded, she raised her mic, and it ends, she said, her tone measured, when listening becomes selective. The shift was instant, audible even in the silence. A few people gasped, a few laughed nervously. The rest just looked between them, unsure whether they had witnessed courage or sacrilege. Oprah's face didn't move, but her eyes did, narrowing just slightly, in disbelief that anyone had dared to finish her sentence. Selective? Oprah repeated, drawing out the word, spinning it like silk between her fingers. Sometimes leadership means knowing which voices guide and which distract. The audience exhaled. It sounded like agreement, but not conviction. Crockett nodded, a faint smile ghosting across her face. True, but when we start labeling truth as distraction, we're not leading anymore. We're protecting our comfort. The murmurs grew louder this time, rippling through the auditorium like static. Cameras panned across the crowd. Half leaned forward in awe, half in unease. Some clapped. Others folded their arms. Oprah straightened in her chair. There's a difference, she said, her tone coated in experience, between confrontation and contribution. Women, especially, should understand that balance. Crockett's reply was soft but unflinching. Balance doesn't mean silence. And confrontation isn't chaos when it's about truth. It landed like a stone in water. No immediate splash, just widening rings of tension. The air felt charged, waiting for someone to blink first. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, unsure where to focus. Oprah's poise began to look more like defense than grace. The composure that once ruled every room now felt fragile, almost rehearsed. And Crockett, still, centered, unbothered, spoke with the ease of someone who had nothing left to prove. The silence before the storm settled over the room. And then, with one calm sentence, Crockett flipped the entire narrative. Oprah tried to steer the moment back under control, her tone silk over steel. Let's not mistake passion for authority, she said, the words dressed as guidance, but carrying the edge of reprimand. Crockett didn't respond right away. She tilted her head, listening, as if weighing the gravity of what had just been said. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. Authority without accountability isn't leadership. It's theater. The crowd inhaled as one. Oprah smiled tightly, the kind of smile that had diffused 1,000 interviews, and leaned in as though speaking to a student. You're young, Jasmine. You'll learn that time gives perspective. She didn't get to finish. Crockett raised a hand slightly, not to silence, but to reclaim space. With respect, she said softly, I've had all the perspective I need from watching people mistake comfort for wisdom. Murmurs rippled through the audience. A camera flash caught Oprah's face just as her expression froze between patience and disbelief. Then came the line, calm, unhurried, deliberate. Power isn't the mic in your hand, Crockett said, eyes locked on hers. It's what you do when someone tries to take it away. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. The sound tech blinked. The moderator's clipboard trembled. Then, the eruption, a roar of applause so loud it drowned the stage monitors. Phone shot up. Flashes lit the room like lightning. On the live stream, comments surged faster than they could load. She said it. That's leadership. Oprah just got schooled with grace. Others tried to defend the icon. Out of context. She meant well. But the narrative was already gone. Crockett didn't bask in the reaction. She waited for the noise to settle, then continued, her words slicing through the chaos with surgical precision. I grew up watching women like you break ceilings. But I also watched how quickly those ceilings got rebuilt, just higher, shinier, more exclusive. We can't call that progress if truth no longer has a seat at the table. Her tone never wavered. No venom, no mockery, just conviction. It wasn't an attack. It was exposure. The illusion of control that had always surrounded Oprah began to flicker, like stage lighting catching on cracks in glass. Oprah reached for recovery, her voice measured but uncertain. I think what we're both saying, but the audience wasn't listening anymore. Their energy had shifted, their eyes fixed on a younger woman who wasn't supposed to lead this dance. Every word Crockett spoke carried the pulse of a generation tired of reverence without reflection. Crockett went on, her voice lowering but growing somehow louder in meaning. Representation isn't about being seen. It's about what you do with visibility once you've got it. If your platform can't hold disagreement, it's not empowerment. It's entertainment. Gasps. Applause. A woman in the front row wiped tears she didn't understand. The live stream chat turned into a digital chant. Teach her, Jasmine. This is history. Grace with backbone. Oprah's final defense. A soft, let's remember, this isn't a debate, barely survived the echo. Crockett smiled then, not in victory, but in clarity. I didn't come here to be taught, she said, voice cutting through the roar. I came here to teach courage. It was the kind of line that didn't need punctuation. The crowd surged to its feet, applause thundering, some cheering her name, others just standing in awe of what they'd witnessed. Oprah's composure, once unbreakable, now looked like a mask that no longer fit. Crockett stepped back, let the sound wash over her, and for a moment said nothing. The silence between claps felt holy, the pause between old power and new truth. Within minutes, the internet turned a quiet lecture into a digital revolution. Clips hit the internet before the applause had even faded. Within an hour, the hashtag Crockett Clarity was trending across platforms, soon joined by hashtag Mic Drop Moment and hashtag Truth Over Titles. The confrontation was replayed, remixed, slowed down, and soundtracked to gospel choirs and trap beats alike. Millions watched the same moment from different angles, but all drew the same conclusion. Something tectonic had shifted. TikTok lit up with duets, young women mouthing Crockett's lines with fire in their eyes. Twitter, or what was now called X, became a battlefield. Was Oprah humbled? One viral post asked. Another shot back. No, she just met her mirror. Screenshots of Crockett's calm expression spread like scripture. Commentators filled the airwaves by morning. Cable panels dissected body language. Podcasts called it the generational passing of the torch. For years, Oprah had been the symbol of composed wisdom. But now, a younger voice had matched her tone and flipped it into something sharper, freer. On YouTube, analysts parsed every pause, every blink. Some claimed it was a misunderstanding of tone. Others called it a reckoning decades in the making. But the truth was simpler. Crockett hadn't attacked legacy. She'd just refused to bow to it. News anchors asked why audiences felt seen through her defiance. One headline read, "When dignity spoke louder than fame." Another, "The night power blinked." Meanwhile, Crockett said nothing. No Instagram notes, no tweets, no interviews. Just silence, the kind that hums with meaning. In a world addicted to reaction, restraint became her rebellion. The still image of her standing with a mic, half-smile steady, became a digital relic, shared by activists, teachers, and teenagers who'd never watched an Oprah interview before in their lives. Oprah's team moved quickly, releasing a neutral statement about spirited discourse and mutual respect. But the internet had already written the story. Neutrality read as retreat. A comment under the official post summed it up perfectly. "You can't spin authenticity." Days passed, and the numbers only grew. Tens of millions of views. Think pieces about the end of performative mentorship. Late-night hosts joked about Crockett's calm chaos. And through it all, the silence from Crockett's camp became louder than any PR response could hope to be. It wasn't just a viral moment. It was validation. For every woman told to watch her tone. For every young leader dismissed as inexperienced. For every truth-teller asked to soften the blow. By the week's end, even those who hadn't seen the clip had heard about it. A cultural flashpoint had been born, one that didn't belong to either woman anymore, but to everyone who'd ever felt unseen in rooms that preached empowerment. And yet, while the world obsessed over the spectacle, something deeper was unfolding, away from lights, cameras, and hashtags. Because what Jasmine said next, offstage, unrecorded, turned a viral storm into a movement. Weeks later, when the storm had finally softened into waves of reflection, Jasmine Crockett agreed to her first interview. The reporter expected fire, but what arrived instead was calm. Crockett smiled lightly when asked if she'd meant to humiliate Oprah. Her answer was simple. You don't humiliate someone when you speak your truth. You free the space. It wasn't defiance, it was release. The clip played everywhere, but this time, the tone was different. The world wasn't watching a clash anymore. It was witnessing clarity. She explained that moments like that one weren't about winning or dominance. It's about reminding people that authenticity doesn't need to shout, she said. It resonates, even when the room goes quiet. Her voice carried that familiar steadiness, the kind that made silence feel full. Commentators began reframing the narrative. What once read as Crockett versus Oprah evolved into something broader. Integrity versus ego. Two generations, two philosophies, one rooted in control, the other in courage. And somehow, Crockett had shown that grace could dismantle arrogance without ever raising its voice. Clips of her quote spread just as fast as the confrontation once had. Teachers replayed it in classrooms. Activists opened rallies with it. Even corporate seminars used it to redefine leadership tone. What was once seen as rebellion began to look like renewal, because beneath the viral noise, a deeper truth pulsed. Leadership's next chapter doesn't belong to those who dominate the room. It belongs to those unafraid to stay human inside it. The ones who can hold their ground without needing to crush anyone else's. The ones who understand that composure isn't weakness. It's power at peace with itself. As the camera lingered on Crockett in that interview, she looked neither triumphant nor apologetic, just centered. "I didn't come here to replace anyone," she said softly. "I came to remind us what voice really sounds like when it's not filtered by fear." The segment ended there, but the echo remained. Online, in coffee shops, in quiet moments between friends, people repeated her words, trying them on like armor. And as the screen faded to black, the narration returned, steady, cinematic, and sure. In a world obsessed with power, it's composure that truly commands the room. The applause may have ended, but the reverberation hadn't. Because what Jasmine Crockett gave that night wasn't a takedown. It was a mirror, one that asked everyone watching to decide. When your truth is tested, will you defend your ego or your integrity? And that brings us full circle to the line that silenced the stage. She didn't humiliate Oprah. She humbled the culture. In one moment of calm defiance, Jasmine Crockett reminded millions that truth stands taller than fame, and dignity doesn't need a spotlight to shine. What began as a clash became a mirror, reflecting what power looks like when it's anchored in composure, not ego. If you believe composure is the loudest form of power, share this moment. Subscribe and be part of the movement that refuses to bow when arrogance tries to silence brilliance. Fade out. Crockett lowering the mic, silence roaring louder than applause.